just to.
Nice to meet you, Joe.
Yeah.
Thursday, Thursday and Friday. So Stratum actually held in, I think it was early July. Um,
Start the meeting as we normally do. Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I think another 10 tries, we're going to get that right. But it's challenging, obviously. Welcome, everybody. I also need to start, as we have been for the past few meetings, by reading a notice of the governor's order that allows us to meet remotely. So I ask for your patience for just a minute while we get this into the recording and into the record. As chairman of the Municipal Budget Committee, due to the COVID-19 coronavirus crisis and in accordance with Governor Sununu's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this board is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously, though the meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, this is to confirm that we are A, access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing the Zoom platform for this electronic meeting, and all members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting through dialing area code. And I need to switch to the meeting notice so that I'm giving everyone the correct information. Area code 646-558-8656, and our meeting ID is 951-6405-3695. By providing public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting via Zoom, instructions are provided on the town's website at www.newmarketnh.gov. Providing the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. In that case, please call area code 602-292-1221. And during the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note all votes taken during this meeting should be done by roll call vote. All right, thank you everybody for your patience. We'll do a quick roll call attendance of the budget committee. Jeff, as I said, had a conflict this evening, so he's not able to be with us. Rob Ortons. You're on mute, Rob.
Yeah, couldn't find the button. I am here. I am alone.
Roger Cady.
Here.
Are you alone?
Alone.
Thank you. Joe.
Here and alone.
Mike LaBranch.
Present and alone.
John Baldy.
Present and alone.
Eric Wagode.
Present and alone.
Mike Kennison.
Here and alone.
Zach Dumont.
Present and alone.
We also have some guests this evening. So just quickly, Bill Tappan, are you present and alone?
I am present and alone.
Jana Mellon.
Present and alone. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you very much. And also joining us, Matt Evangelista. Are you present and alone?
Yes, present and alone.
All right, thank you. Now with all of the formalities.
We also have Patty Lovejoy.
I apologize. If you just confirm that you're present and alone.
I am present and alone, other than a
Thank
cat.
you. Okay. Patty is, you are a state representative, correct? For the
Yes,
district representing
yes,
Newmarket?
I represent, I have Floterial, I have Stratham, Exeter, Newfields, and Newmarket. I've been at the State House for 10 years. My original background was as a tax person. I've done Ways and Means and Finance. So I know a lot about the budget, both sides. And later tonight, we'll go over what the tax structure and the revenue structure of the state is to give you a little background.
Thank you. We appreciate the time. Steve also suggested, and I think it's a good idea, to just make everybody aware that Patty is also a candidate for executive council in the state. So we do, as a committee, we extend an open invitation to any other candidates who would like to speak to the committee and help enlighten us on the things that they're doing. We're not, this should know it is an endorsement one way or the other of Patty's candidacy. She's just generously volunteered her time to help us understand a little better the state, how the state takes in money and disperses money, in the form of the state education taxes and other taxes the state collects. So thank you for joining us. Okay, next on the agenda, or first on the real agenda, is the approval of the minutes of our August 3rd, 2020 meeting. I entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
This is Joe. Can I make a motion to move some things in the agenda? Specifically the approval of the minutes, because I think that's going to take a little bit. I want to have a discussion about the stuff that's missing.
Okay.
And the approval for Matt, move that to the end, and the review of the language for the budget committee policy, move all three of those things to the end. The reason I say for Matt, he can't vote on anything until he's sworn in anyway.
I have no objections. Is there a second to the motion for starters?
Second.
Thank you, Roger. Discussion. Does anybody have strong feelings, pro or con, that they'd like to share?
Sounds like the courteous thing to do.
I don't disagree. Any other comments? All right, so we'll do a roll call vote on this. Rob Ortons,
Aye.
Roger Cady,
Aye.
Joe Lamatino.
Aye.
Thank you. Mike LeBranch,
Aye.
John Baldy,
Aye.
Eric Wagode,
Aye.
chair votes aye. Mike Kennison,
Aye.
Zach Dumont.
Aye.
All right, so we're unanimous. We will put off the minutes and try to get our invited guests through the so that they're not trapped here for the evening.
Mhm.
So to that end, we'll start with Bill Tappan. I first off like to welcome Bill to the town. He's now doing finance on the town side, and he's joined us this evening to give us an update on where the town stands at the end of fiscal year 2020, the financial performance, the fund balance, and also share with us any updated outlook the town has, the impact of the pandemic and other things on the town's finances for the upcoming year.
Well, thank you. Pleased to be here. So everyone got a copy of the report, the financial report from me that was sent on, I think, last week, Thursday. I'm not familiar with how you usually get this information, but I think probably the first thing is to highlight the fact that we were, or how we did at the end of the year in terms of our expenditures. And if the quick and dirty method would be to go straight down to the bottom and look at your total operating budget expenses, which were at 97% used. And which, depending on how you look at the things, is we either did 3% better or 2% better than last year, or we didn't budget as closely as we had in the prior year. It all depends on your perspective. skipping to the revenue section. Similar situation in terms of, if you look at this as good budgeting, you were close to what your expectations were in terms of having collected roughly 100% of the anticipated revenues through the year, which, given the year that we've had, is not a bad thing. Last year, you had collected, in percentage terms, 101% of anticipated revenues. So I think, generally speaking, we did relatively well. I have been tracking this with a spreadsheet and doing some graphing, and then running some basic linear trend lines just to see, so how are we doing? How have we done according to past years? And in terms of our revenue collection, it's been about, actually probably better than anticipated, particularly when you listen to what's been said on the news over the last few months in terms of, oh, there's going to be, we're going to run deficits all over the place, and we're going to be having massive cuts. I don't know what it's like around the rest of the country in terms of specifics, but I would say overall we've actually had a pretty good year in that respect. If you compare same period year over year, we're pretty much right on track. And when I recently spoke with the town clerk tax collector, Terry Littlefield, I was asking her in the beginning, I asked, so how have we done in the worst of times, particularly during the Great Recession? And her answer was, actually, we didn't see much of an impact in terms of revenues. So that gave me some hope, but I was uncertain as to, what that could mean today, because there's slightly different conditions, and it was very sudden what occurred. However, we really haven't seen any significant changes in terms of real estate revenue collection. And in terms of, and as a matter of fact, when I met with her just recently, she said that she was pretty much, normally is at this time of year, at 95% collected, which is very good. The water and sewer, similar situation. I think it was water that was a little bit lower. I think he was somewhere around 80+% revenue collection at that point. And this was an interesting tidbit of information that when there's no possibility of having shutoffs, then the likelihood that someone may not pay if they don't have to goes up. So it seems like that may have played itself out to a small degree here in town during this time. The other thing that I wanted to point up is that some of you may be aware of the gopher, what they're calling gopher and FEMA reimbursement as part of the whole COVID-19 response. And we've been tracking and submitting for reimbursement during this entire period while it's been allowed. And we've had a number of these expenses covered as a result of that. So that's been a positive for the community. The other thing, just from an accounting standpoint, so that you're aware of how we've done this, we wanted to make sure that we weren't hitting our normal general fund expenditure budget. So because this is a grant, these are both grants essentially, either from the state government. Well, it's actually federal, but it's managed by the state, and that's the gopher. And then the other part, FEMA, both are grants. And so we've separated that out and it's been segregated off to itself in another fund, and it's actually in another one of the reports that I provided you with, the grant report. And I believe it's it's in what's called Fund 17. And so you can see down there, COVID-19 at the very bottom shows what we spent, gotten reimbursement first for, and what's left over so far. So we're looking good there. I just realized, excuse me, that's my phone. I'm gonna go whack it. So
Whoop.
sorry about that. I'm back. Unexpected. I actually forget that I have a regular phone because I never use it. Anyway, so the COVID stuff that we've been reimbursed for is essentially anything that's related to what we've been doing in terms of protection of first responders, anything that required, if we had to put funding up for things like being able to have remote meetings and work remotely while people were considered essential, needed to continue their work, and other things like that. So we've been fortunate in that the government's really stepped up and supported all of the communities during this event.
Bill, I have a question regarding water and wastewater.
Yes.
I noticed that as of the end of last year, wastewater was considerably, the revenues were considerably different than the budget. And so were water. One was off by 20%, the other by about 28%. But they were off in opposite directions. And that intrigues me because generally sewer and water, I would think, would track each other. I would expect water maybe to be a little bit higher if there was unusual usage, but I certainly wouldn't expect sewer to be low, nor the variation between the two be about 50%.
Okay, I'm writing down what you're asking because I want to make sure that I follow up with a good answer for this. I don't know for sure. I do know that having spoken very briefly with Sean Gregg, the DES director, that some of this is related to the restaurant closures, but I'm not sure just how much of that is really at play here. And I don't know exactly what the difference between water and sewer is in terms of the mechanics. So I'll need to speak with him and get information for you before I can give you a really honest answer.
I'd appreciate your following up with us. Thank you.
You bet.
Other questions for Bill? All right, Bill, we thank you for your time this evening, and if any other questions come up, we'll be sure to send them along.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and nice to meet everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Next up on our agenda is the school district. Jana Mellon, the business administrator, is with us this evening. We did get a preliminary look at where the school district had believed they were going to come out relative to the fiscal year 2020 budget last week. So, Jana, maybe in the interest of time, if there are any big variances versus what we thought on August 3rd when we got together, you could start by highlighting those.
Hi, sure. Thank you very much. And good evening to all of you. I actually have more than an estimate. I have completed the DOE 25, which is basically the form that we have to submit at the conclusion of our fiscal year. I'm sorry, I just realized my camera's off. Sorry. There I am. Sorry. Anyways, we just finished the DOE 25. It's due. And we actually do have a number for you, the number that everybody cares about that comes off that form, which is the unrestricted fund balance that's able to reduce taxation. While the final audit of our financial statements is still pending, and we don't expect that probably until October, it is unlikely at this point that our auditors are going to make any changes to the statements of a material nature. So I can comfortably tell you that what we are submitting to the Department of Revenue, which ties out to the preliminary auditor's report, is $1,082,620. So that will be after we've taken out our retained fund balance. That the town has a much bigger retained fund balance. We have a small amount that we can take out 2.5%. So that is the amount that will offset taxation. As I said, I don't expect any material changes to that. It may go up or down a little bit, but I think that's pretty much where we're going to land. Relative to the update on the financial forecast impacts, as you know, in the school district, our fiscal year runs July 1st through June 30th. So while you're halfway through your year, we're just at the start under some pretty challenging conditions. We're still gelling up staffing. We're ordering supplies and necessities to bring kids back to the building. We're, day to day, everything is definitely in flux. We feel pretty good about where we're going and what we're doing. But the school board at this point, and Mike can probably speak more to this, has offered to waive a couple of board policies just because of the difficult nature of this situation with COVID-19, to allow us a little bit more flexibility and latitude to make these expenditures on a more expedient basis. And as such, sometimes we have to, we haven't figured out exactly where all the financial pieces will land just yet. There's such long lead times on things like technology and equipment that sometimes we haven't had a lot of opportunity to follow the practices that we normally would. So we're very grateful to the board for giving us that flexibility to react and do what we need to do to bring kids back safely. And we do expect to have a full quarterly report for you that will reflect all those movements and all of that data, in the first quarter. I had submitted on August 17th. I didn't see it in the board packet in the budget committee materials, but I had submitted a report that kind of talked about our COVID-19, where we thought we were going to be. It also addressed certain funding buckets that we have available to us. And I didn't know if you wanted me to speak to that, or if you would rather I wait for another meeting on that one.
Is this the ESSER grant you're talking about, that note? Or is this something?
It's actually, it's the ESSER grant, and it's the public assistance grants, which I believe Bill was referring to as the FEMA grants. It's through the Homeland Security Department. So I submitted a tally of what we had as of August 11th of expenditures. We obviously that's a moving target. But I can speak in generalities, and then if you'd like, I can send the document along to the committee again.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind giving us just a general oversight or general opinion of what you think we might be able to recover from this.
Sure. So the two funding mechanisms that we have available, one, as Roger, I think it was Roger or Joe perhaps mentioned, the ESSER grant, that is the more flexible of the two. We can use that for expenditures related to remote learning. We can use it for PPE. We can use it for equipment, sanitation, different things like that. We have a limited amount. We have about $108,000 that we are limited to. That grant works like most of our federal funding in that you put forward an activity, the activity gets approved, you expend against that activity, and then you receive reimbursement from the state at the end of the month once you report. The Homeland Security Public Assistance Grant, It's actually DR 4516 is the project number. It's really geared more towards, I would say, towards like emergency responders in towns, although there are pieces of that grant that we can tap into as schools as well. It's much more limited in scope than the other funding source. It allows us to recoup 75% of eligible expenditures. And most of our expenditures in the school have to do with sanitation, equipment required for sanitation, PPE, gloves, masks, that kind of thing. So that said, we have been tracking, as Bill has indicated on the town side, we've been tracking expenditures since this whole in situation, I guess we'll call, began in March, where it was declared as a national emergency. So we have a very good accounting of what we've spent. I'm proud to say we've already submitted one claim for the 2019-20. I've been working with our, we have a liaison at the state. We've submitted that. We're now waiting for reimbursement on that. We submitted just under $10,000 in eligible expenditures. I anticipate we're going to get roughly 75% of that. So it's going to work out to be about $7,300. We haven't got the payment yet, but the list of expenditures has been reviewed and accepted by the grant funding authority. As for what we've been doing over the summer and going into the next year, that $10,000 that we spent last year is a drop in the bucket compared to what we've had to do with table dividers and all of the equipment that we needed to bring kids back into a in-present school educational model. So there are a lot more expenditures now. I'm waiting to hear back from my liaison because the state has decided that they're going to expand the guidelines a little bit about expenditures that are eligible based on the situation that schools are in. So for example, in 2019-20, my acrylic table dividers that I needed to put up to keep kids safe at school were not considered an eligible expense, but that's being considered as one of the things that you can add to. Another big ticket item is we're having an HVAC consultant come in and review things and make sure that we're maximizing our HVAC system, that we have a negative pressure room for the quarantine rooms and all sorts of things that we never anticipated nor planned for as a school. So in the 2019-20 portion in the submittal rate, those kind of expenditures were not something we could have received reimbursement from, but early indications are that we will be able to get reimbursement for those kind of expenditures in this year. So as soon as he gives me some guidance on that, I can put through claims kind of piecemeal. I can batch things and put them through. So I already have a batch kind of ready to go, queued up, waiting to hear what we might be eligible for. So that's all good news. We have had to take on some additional staff in order to meet the protocols of minimizing our class sizes to ensure social distancing and things like that. So as I mentioned, while we're getting some benefit from here, we're expending a little more there. And once we get back into the swing of things and can catch a breath and kind of take a good look at everything, we'll be able to determine which funding sources go where, what things are going to get reimbursed, and how we're going to move things around to address the district need to educate. Nutshell, if you're looking for a dollar figure, as of August 11th, we had $268,285.78 had gone out the door in COVID-related expenditures. But again, that's from March through the summer. And so that kind of combined the 2 years together. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot else to tell you. I imagine that we'll get into a lot more detail when I can submit the first quarterly financial and we can kind of walk through that detail. But at this point, it's kind of high level. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to entertain.
Yeah, just quickly, you mentioned that you added some positions to be able to keep the class sizes where we want. Can you characterize those positions and roughly how many of them we've added?
Yep. Well, some of them aren't full additions because they were shifts. For example, we may have had somebody that was a certified paraprofessional that was paid on one salary scale, but because they had a certification, we were able to move them to a teacher scale. So it's not a full teacher position that will be the cost, but you know, there will be an additional cost there. I believe it came down to there was a total of positions that we needed to shift around to try and maintain and serve our remote students and keep to protocols within our buildings. That said, we also have some areas that we didn't fill at all over the summer. We were down a bunch of a couple of custodian positions. We were down a curriculum director for part of the summer until she joined us. And we have just begun, we're trying to hire some paraprofessionals, but we're down quite a few paraprofessionals as well. So it's one of those things that we're going to have to kind of get everything together, get everybody entered into payroll. We're still adding people to payroll because we're still actively hiring right now. So I don't have some good numbers there yet, but once we get a couple weeks into the year, we should have a lot better sense of where we're going to land and what our needs are. We have been able to find some staffing from some free sources. We've got some nursing interns that are going to be helping at the school. I believe they work, they're from the UNH program. I haven't had a role in doing that, but they are doing this as part of their education. And they'll be working with our nurses in the morning to help check kids in, take temperatures and do things like that. We've also got a couple of teaching interns that do different universities to see if they could come and maybe do a free internship in our classrooms, help us with coverage and help us to accommodate some of the challenges we have with supervision of kids when we have some teachers that are teaching remotely. So we've tried to be as economical and as thrifty and creative as we could possibly be to weather this. And as I mentioned, I think last time, you know, we've procured used desks as opposed to buying new furniture from the Bedford district. We are very grateful to them. They gave us 73 desks, and basically every one of those desks has been deployed in some fashion in our district to help distance kids. So for the cost of a rider truck, that was a pretty economical way to add capacity. So we are looking at all of that stuff. We've purchased a bunch of sanitation equipment. We have one unit, basically a backpack unit or a walk behind sanitizing unit for each custodian, which is fantastic. That means that they can sanitize our buildings very quickly and efficiently. We're closing our buildings at 5 o'clock to all staff other than custodians to allow time for that sanitation and to use that equipment properly. So, you know, lots of planning. I could go on for hours about all the different things, but you hear all that.
I guess I only had one other question after looking at the estimated expenditures that you sent out. So DW, is that a code word for the SAU offices? That seems to be the only space the school district owns that I can't account for with the other abbreviation.
That's a really good question. It stands for district-wide. When we report our expenditures to the New Hampshire Department of Education, we have to break it down by school and by level, but there are services that are district-wide. And so we have, when we report to the DOE, we have to prorate those based on student counts. So that's kind of our way of breaking that down into a category we know we need to prorate. It didn't belong at either school, it served both.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
Yeah, this is Joe. I have a question. Correct me if I don't understand this correctly or if I don't have this correctly, but so far we've got $268,000 in COVID related expenses. And if I understand it correctly, we've got about 109,000 reimbursement committed to Newmarket, which leaves us with, with about $159,000 deficit. Is my understanding of that correct at this point?
Yes and no. We have 108,000 under the ESSER grant, but the Homeland Security that I spoke about for eligible expenditures, you can get 75% of those expenditures reimbursed, and that's the piece that we still are waiting on guidance as to which items are reimbursable and which aren't. So clearly we wouldn't seek reimbursement for items that we are going to put under the ESSER grant. It would be for other things that don't, we would probably put things under the Homeland Security that we know we would be, that we could recoup under there at 75% and save the ESSER grant for things that wouldn't be eligible under that funding, such as technology, student connectivity, different things like that that we need for remote learning.
Okay, so we still don't know the true deficit then, I guess, at this point.
No, no, we're still spending. We still have technology pieces that we're putting out. We're looking at using even Title IV and Title II funds to work it all together. We're looking at all different, and those are things that we normally have every year. The two I spoke about are different and COVID related, but we always get Title II and we get Title IV. So we're looking to write our grants to maximize those grants, all those funding buckets to serve the need.
Rough ballpark figure, though, where do you think we're gonna? I hate to put you on the spot. No,
You won't put me on the spot because I won't answer it.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Which is a good answer. Other questions before we release Jana to enjoy the rest of her evening? Going once, going twice. Thank you for joining us. We
All right,
appreciate
you're welcome.
the
Have a
update.
great night.
All right.
All right. If nobody has an objection, I'm going to switch the last two bullets of new business so that Patty can give us her presentation and we don't consume any more of her evening. So if everybody has the document that I sent out, the curriculum, I believe, that Patty shared with us, as soon as she gets the lighting correct, Patty, please take it away.
There we go. Wait a second. I gotta find it on my desktop now. I had it up here. Okay. Hopefully you all have this, what I sent you, that I called New Hampshire Taxes 101. I've been doing this for state reps and senators, various town committees over the last several years. What I'm going to try to do is give you an overview of where the state gets its money and a little bit about how we go about spending it. And some of this, I'll give you some background as to how it came about. Some of it won't make you happy. I can tell you that right now, but the first thing to know about New Hampshire taxes is that our Constitution requires that all taxes must be proportional and reasonable. I don't know where they define reasonable, but proportional means you have to have the same rate. You can't have, if you were to have an income tax, you can't have a progressive income tax. You have to have a flat rate. The courts have allowed that you can have a floor such that anything up to a certain level isn't taxed, but everything above that has to be taxed at the same level. There's this organization called the Tax Foundation, and they put together this facts and figures every year, and they compare the states. 8 ways to Christmas. There must be about 60 different things that they compare them on. But I just wanted to kind of give of how New Hampshire ranks with other states. They rate our state business tax climate as the 6th best in the nation. They use 5 different categories and I don't know how much they weight each one. Whatever the magic is they use on that, they don't disclose to us. But like our corporate tax rate, we've got one of the highest. We're 43rd. Individual income tax, we're pretty low. We're at 9th. We do have an income tax. It's not broad based. It's just on interest and dividends. Obviously, sales tax, we come in first. Our unemployment tax, we're not great on that at 45th, and our property tax, to no surprise, we are 44th worst in the nation. Trying to give you where our sources of how we fund everything. So if you're looking at everything, not just at the state level, looking at your local levels, your schools, your fire departments, at the county, which is, you know, the sheriffs, the courts, the nursing home, and everything at the state level. You put everything together, 67.6%, almost 68% of everything in this state is paid for by property taxes. Nobody's close to it. Alaska's went up this last year to 51. I'm not sure why they jumped up. Obviously, you know, the sales tax is low. Our corporate tax, we only get 8%, 8.7% of all of our, you know, for funding all of that. And other taxes, we have a whole bunch of little things. We're a fairly wealthy state, because if you look at income per capita, we are the 8th wealthiest. So there's a lot of people in the state that make a lot of money. They may walk around with jeans with holes in them, but overall, we are a very wealthy state. The KPMG Pete Mawick did a study for the state back in the early 90s, to kind of looking at our revenue and our expenses. And they told us then that we have a structural deficit by the way we bring in money and the way we spend it, that every year the additional expenses are not covered by revenues. So the way we've made that up over the years is we've pushed things down to the towns. Now it's not great. So looking at our overall, just on for the state revenues now, we have a business profits tax, and we have a business profits tax and the business enterprise tax. The business profits tax came about in the early 70s. Before that, towns like Newmarket and everybody else used to do stock and trade taxes. So you charge somebody, you know, for their, you know, so much tax on their tractor and, you know, everything to do with business. The state did not tax businesses. The local towns did. And in the early 70s, when the state was trying to move away from an agrarian society more towards a more modern one, they did away with stock and trade taxes. And as you know, in New Hampshire, the towns can only do what the state tells them that they can do. You can't go off and do anything on your own. So when the state took away that ability to do stock and trade taxes and put in a business profits tax instead, they said to the towns, don't worry. I mean, we're going to share this revenue with you. And they did for several years. It was revenue sharing. Well, you know, near the end of the last recession, we don't share it with you anymore. So there's no revenue sharing going on now. And this tax rate, the business profits tax, it's moved around a little bit. Right now, it's at 7.7%. There was a potential for it to go lower next year, but because our revenues didn't reach a certain level, that's not going to happen. The business enterprise tax came about in '93 because of a court challenge from Cabletron. Basically, our business profits tax is only paid by a pretty small group of businesses. There's a small group that pays the lion's share of this. And Cabletron, their suit was, that's not fair. And so the state lost that lawsuit, and the state came up with this business enterprise tax. And you are charged based upon your payroll, payroll interest that you pay, and dividends that you pay. And every business, there's a floor. So you have to have, your business has to have gross receipts in excess of 200,000. But businesses that are above that, whether you make a profit or not, you pay the business enterprise tax. But if you do get a credit for it against your business profits tax. So the bigger companies really are just paying their business profits tax because they get enough credit from the business enterprise tax. But those two together, it's around 30% of the state's revenue, which is extremely unusual. Most states have a broad-based either income tax or a sales tax. So their business taxes are a very, very small sliver. You know, if you look at the whole pie, most other states, business taxes are a very, very small sliver of it. Ours, it's 30%. We have rooms and meals tax. The rooms and meals tax is 9% on rooms, meals, and motor vehicle rentals. So that is a sales tax, but it's not a broad-based sales tax because it's just on rooms, meals, and motor vehicles. We have an income tax, which is the interest and dividends tax. Once again, it's not a broad-based tax. And it's 5%, and that rate hasn't changed since 1977. You have an exemption of $2,400 for an individual and $4,800 for joint, and then there's a little bit higher if you're over 65. That in the budget that was first passed by the House and Senate last year was extending the interest and dividends tax to all capital gains. The IRS considers capital gains as unearned income, the same thing as interest and dividends. That would have provided about $80 million, which was all going to be used for education. When the budget got vetoed and we negotiated back and forth, that went away. So it didn't end up being in the final budget. We get quite a bit of our income from tobacco. 7.7% of our total revenue comes from tobacco. If we smoked all the cigarettes that we sell in this state, we would all have lung cancer. We have a much lower tax than the other states around us. Ours is at $1.78 a pack. You're looking at Connecticut is $4.35. Rhode Island's $4.25. Mass is $3.51. So a lot of people come over to New Hampshire to buy their cigarettes. And in this last year, we've really benefited because Massachusetts banned the sale of any menthol cigarettes. And plus, they banned all their vaping and the Juuls and all that kind of stuff. So there's more people coming to New Hampshire to buy tobacco and tobacco-related. The real estate transfer tax, that's a little less than 6% of our income. That's actually still doing fairly well. People are actually buying and selling houses. Both the buyer and seller pay 75 cents per $100 on it. The statewide education property tax, in my opinion, is just a sham. When we lost the lawsuit that the state needed to pay for an adequate education, we came up with this way. We said, okay, we're going to do the statewide property tax. It's been the same amount every year. It's $363 million, and they look at what's the total property base of the entire state, come up with how much it's going to be per thousand of property. Each town, if you look at your tax bill, it has a thing for statewide property tax. But Newmarket keeps it all, whether or not that's what you needed for adequacy, or if it was in some cases, like some of the property around the lakes and on the ocean, what they collected statewide property tax is way more than what their adequate education is supposed to be. But you get to keep it. So you raise it at your town level and spend it at your town level. So, but it gives the state the ability to say that the state is spending $363 million more on education, but it's really, you're collecting it at your town, you're keeping it in your town, no matter what. So I'll get off my soapbox. That's one of those things that drives me crazy. Liquor, we do pretty well. We get 5% of all of our revenue from liquor. There are a few other states like us where we run the liquor business. If you buy a bottle of wine at Shaw's had to buy it from the state. Everything goes through the state liquor store. So every bar and restaurant has to buy their liquor and wine through the state.
Patty, can I
Um,
quickly I mean, this is
Sure.
kind of semantic, but when you say $133 million of revenue, that's not really the revenue from all the liquor that's sold. That's the state's profit on it, correct?
That's under liquor, yeah, the 133 million, that's what we make. That's our profit.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, because
we
I'm sure the
sell,
revenues are like large
yeah,
multiples of
we
that.
sell a hell of a lot more than that. Yes.
Okay.
And we've been doing pretty well in the COVID. COVID's been, I thought it would be really, the revenues would be way down because the restaurants aren't selling it, but we're personally all making up for that. And then, about 20% of our revenue is a whole bunch of little things. With lottery, brings in about 4%. The insurance tax is about 5%. It's really a business profits tax because they get a credit on their business profits tax for what they pay for this insurance tax. So there's a whole, mixture of little fees and stuff here and there. There are a couple of dedicated funds. Fish and Game until a few years ago used to always be able to fund itself. They're actually doing really well this year. Everybody's buying fishing licenses. There's nothing else to do, so our fishing license sales are like way up. But Fish and Game gets charged with all of the cost of search and rescue. So we've been having to fund, and the people who get searched and rescued are generally not people who bought a fishing license or a hunting license. The highway fund is, yeah. We do start we have charged a few people. If you are really, really stupid and do something really dumb, we've been charging you. The highway fund, we have what's called a road toll. Everybody refers to it. Our gas tax is lower than most of the other states here. For all practical purposes, we haven't raised it since like 1991. We did a 4-cent one a few years ago, but all of that money was put into a dedicated fund within the dedicated fund, mostly being used for paying off the bonds for I-93, and a little bit went back to each of the towns. In that part of the problem with the road tax, if you think back to 1991, the vehicle that you had in 1991 probably doesn't get the gas mileage that a vehicle you have today is. So the amount that we are paying per mile for gas tax has gone down pretty significantly. And we have a lot of things that don't use gasoline, the hybrids and the electric vehicles. Electric vehicles right now aren't paying anything for the use of the roads. They've been trying for the last few years to try to get something in, and it hasn't happened. So we do have the lowest gasoline tax in New England, and one of the lowest in the Northeast. Ours is like 23 cents. Connecticut's 40. It's 30. So it's there's room to there's room, in my opinion. Others may not agree with me, to increase that and use, those funds could be shared with the towns to deal with roads and bridges in your town. So that's kind of where we get our money. When I'm looking at, our budget for our revenues, in the first, we have a biennium. So within a 2-year period, you have to balance the budget. So we always pass what we think is going to be a balanced budget. But then, things can go to hell like COVID. In the first year of this budget, we were down, I think it was 142, I think it was 142 2 million. In the first 2 months of this year, we're actually up. I think we're up like 17 million. And part of that is because of timing. Just like the federal government gave individuals, if your tax was due in April, you didn't have to pay it in April. You could have waited until July to pay it. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I waited to July to pay mine. And we did the same thing for like interest and dividends, and some of the business taxes were delayed. So part of the 142 million in the hole. Some of that was timing. So we're the so right now we're at 17 million. The thing that's down the most is rooms and meals. No big surprise. Even in the first 2 months from budget, we're down 22 million. But it's other things are above because of some of the timing. The real estate transfer tax is still doing really well, but the big negative is the rooms and meals. So if you take the 142 million that we were down and you add what we're the amount that we're ahead in these first 2 months, we're still down 125 million. But it's really 150 million because when we pass the budget, we have this little trick that on the last page of the budget will say, notwithstanding anything else here, certain agencies need to cut money out of their budget. This last time we only had one back of the budget cut, and it was for 25 million to Health and Human Services. So basically we started in the hole, 25 million, and told Health and Human Services they needed to where to cut that. Soon after the budget was passed, the Commissioner of Health and Human Services said he was going to be getting done at the beginning of the year. The new work person came in, and before she had a chance to try to figure out where to do the $25 million cut, COVID happened. So even though it looks like we're down 125 right now, we're really down 150. Various people have made assumptions that the second year could be down as much as 300 million. I think that's high, but it's going to, I do think unless the world suddenly turns around and everything gets wonderful, I think the business profits tax are going to get really hit, and obviously rooms and meals is going to continue to get hit. So say, just for guesstimates, we end up another 150 million down. We have to make up that 300 million before next June. We do have a rainy day fund that's 115 million, and if it's not pouring now, I'm not sure what it is. So you're still going to have, at best, maybe 200 million that the state has to make up between now and next June. And unfortunately, history of looking at the towns as is some of the ways to make things up. We are supposed to share 40% of rooms and meals with the towns. We don't. We're closer to around 22%. I worry that the governor may say in the second year of the biennium that he's not going to share anything with the towns. I mean, that's a possibility. I mean, once the budget is passed and it's signed into law, then it's the executive branch's responsibility to carry it out. Just like in your town, when you pass a budget, the selectmen, or you don't have selectmen, or your council people, they could decide not to spend all that money. I mean, just because you have it in the budget doesn't mean that they have to spend it. So needless to say, the governor needs to figure out, where to make somewhere in the, probably 200 million of cuts from the budget. They put a freeze in hiring back in March. Obviously, they're not doing any out-of-state travel. I mean, there's things that we're making up, and hopefully most of the additional expenses to do with COVID will get reimbursed through the CARES Act. I mean, we got $1.25 billion. Some of that, your towns, you've been allocated certain amounts, and but so far, everything that Congress has passed, it specifically says that states cannot use any of that money to backfill their budgets, and that's one of the negotiating things that keeps going on down in DC. And if you have a better crystal ball than I do to know where that's going to come out, there have been recommendations to have money in there for towns and cities to be able to backfill their budgets and for states to backfill their budgets. But so far, none of that has been passed. So where the state's going to make up a couple $100 million or more, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure the governor's been doing some work on that, but he hasn't been sharing as to where that kind of. I mean, the last time when we had these shortages, we did things like we stopped revenue sharing. Remember, we used to pay 35% of all the pension costs. So for your teachers and your firemen and people who work for the town, state used to pay 35% of it, and then we dropped it down to, I think, 25%, and then we went, I'm sorry, we're not doing it anymore. So that's how the state helped balance its budget, was by pushing things down. I mean, building aid, I know, is a very sore subject in your town. The Exeter High School got through under the old building aid. So the state actually paid for 60% of everything to do with that school. I was on the school board for 9 years, and I know how much it is. It's the state's paid for a lot of it. Yep, Newmarket, because yours got passed after the moratorium went in, you didn't get any of that. So that's another way that the way the state deals with that structural deficit that, I talked about, that people told us back in the early 90s that we have, and that's how we've done it. We've basically, said to the towns and cities, well, yeah, we used to give you money for that, but we're not going to anymore. So I worry about what might, if Congress doesn't allocate some funds for states to be able to backfill their budgets. And I know this is not good news for any of you, but I just think you should have it in the back of your mind that maybe revenues that you were going to be getting from the state, hopefully you're going to get them, but I'm worried that you might not. On that cheery note, do you have any questions for me?
I was going to say, now that we're all feeling uplifted,
Yes,
and
I'm sorry.
questions for Patty from the committee.
Patty, could you speak for a minute? As you're talking, and we're talking about this sort of pushing down, I sort of think about something like a tax cap. I mean, what's been your experience with SB2 towns and tax caps as sort of a reaction to this whole thing?
I mean, like, Exeter has got a tax cap. There's been some of them that they've been able, at first, a lot of the towns that put in the tax cap, really held to them. But, over the last, few years, there's been more and more times that they will exceed their cap and get approval to do that. I mean, you
mean like an override?
Yes, like an override. Because, when you look, the state would pay 35% of your pension costs. I mean, if you look on the line for your schools, and it's probably buried in your, all the benefits. But if you look up what that number is, that was a big number. I mean, 35% of your entire pension costs. And when over a couple of years, the state no longer paid it, if places kept their caps in place, they would have really been in trouble. It would have been, putting, 40, 50 kids into a classroom. Manchester has tended to stick to theirs more. And, their schools obviously have some issues. Is there rumblings in your town about doing a tax cap, or you don't have a tax cap, do you?
No, we don't.
But I mean, obviously nobody wants, I mean, your town's tax rate is, it's higher, quite a bit higher than Stratham's is. But you're paying the full boat for your school.
Yeah.
In Exeter High School, that whole thing, including equipping it and everything, buying the land, all the equipment, the stadium, everything cost $50 million. And the state paid for 60% of that. And that remaining 40% got shared among 4 towns. So, the impact of the school was just, nowhere near for us as it is for you.
Hmm. Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, Patty, this is answered this to the extent you feel comfortable without, delving too far into opinion. But each and every person who sits in the state legislature represents a town, or more than one town in some cases.
Mhm.
Where does the impetus, the collective impetus to keep pushing the revenue shortfall down to the towns come from? When you, like I said, every single rep represents one or more towns. I'm confident every single rep goes home and campaigns on, we have to stop the state from pushing the tax burden down, yet collectively it happens over and over and over again.
I would say that most reps do not understand the budget. I mean, I've been doing these kind of programs for a lot of the reps to try to help bring more people to understand it. And I'd say there's very few of us that have served on both Ways and Means and Finance. I mean, I'm chair of Finance Division. So my division does the budgets and any legislation that requires money for 32 state agencies. So I obviously have a pretty good grasp of the budget, but I'm probably one of 5 that knows the revenue side and the expense side. So it's, it's tough. And plus, live free or die, we are not going to raise taxes no matter what. So the way you get by without raising taxes at the state level that we as reps vote on, and reps don't want to go back to their districts and say, I voted for a tax increase. But in reality, they are voting for a tax increase because they're voting for a tax increase at the local level, but they're not voting for a tax increase at the state level.
Okay, that as sensible an explanation as there is, I suppose. Other questions for Patty?
If any of you come up with any questions you want to shoot me an email and stuff on, I'd be glad to answer it or just give you a call and talk about any of it. But I mean, I crammed a lot of information in a relatively short, but hopefully it gives you a flavor for how, when the state does things to you, as to why it's doing it and doing them to you.
No, at least for me, it's been tremendously eye-opening to understand what the pieces of the pie look like relative to one another. And so I thank you very, very much for sharing your time with us this evening. And, on behalf of the committee and the town, we really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patty. Very useful.
Okay, I'll probably see you guys around sometime. Okay.
Right. Thank you very much, Patty. That was
Okay.
really good. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you.
Bye now.
Yeah.
All right. Next on our agenda, we have the draft language for the Budget Committee policy on the submission of agenda items, which Joe distributed yesterday, I believe. I hope everybody has that. Speak up now if you don't. Otherwise, yep, Rob.
I'm sorry, I don't think I saw that attachment.
All right, let me forward it to you.
Thank you.
Quickly here. Just one moment. There we go. In the meantime, I guess I'm open to suggestions. If this was the town doing something like this, they would do a first reading and a discussion, and then they would vote on it at the subsequent meeting. I don't think we have to do that, but I'm open to suggestions as to how people would like to process this. Zach, do you have a
Yes, normally the way we would do it at the town level is we would first have a motion to accept the document, and then following that, we would go through and actually discuss line by line things that we want to keep, things that we don't want to keep, if we agree with it as a whole, if we disagree with it as a whole, and then eventually come to a decision as to whether or not we're going to pass it.
Okay, thanks. Every time I see that microphone, I feel like we're in the presence of a celebrity. I really, it's
I'll tone it
fantastic.
down.
No, keep it up. It's great. Well, why don't, if nobody has any objections, why don't we proceed this way? I'll look for a motion to adopt this and a second. And if we have those motions, then we can go through a proper reading and discussion. And depending on how strongly people feel, we'll either decide to vote on it tonight or to take some more time to consider it. Does that work for everybody?
I move adoption.
Thank you, Roger. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Eric. So, I mean, I'll just read it out loud, I guess. So we have it in the recording of the meeting. By the Newmarket Municipal Budget Committee, resolution number 2020/2021-XX, which I assume the X's are in place of not knowing at the moment what the proper number is. Resolution codifying the Municipal Budget Committee's acceptable timeline for agenda items. Whereas per New Hampshire RSA Chapter 32:16, the Municipal Budget Committee is charged, and quoting from the statute, to confer with the governing body or bodies and with other officers, department heads, and other officials relative to estimated costs, revenues anticipated, and services performed to the extent deemed necessary by the Budget Committee. It shall be the duty of officers and other persons to furnish such pertinent information to the Budget Committee. End of quotation. Therefore, the Newmarket Municipal Budget Committee shall adopt the following rules. Number one, the Municipal Budget Committee will accept items to be placed onto their agenda no later than 48 business hours prior to their next regularly scheduled meeting unless approved by the Newmarket Municipal Budget Committee Chair. Number two, the Municipal Budget Committee will accept documents to be reviewed at their next regularly scheduled meeting no later than 48 business hours prior to the scheduled meeting unless approved by a majority of the Municipal Budget Committee. That is the proposal in its entirety.
I guess the first question I have is when you say, when it says 48 business hours, what does that mean? Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, people didn't want to count the weekends, so it would be, yeah, technically, I guess it would say it would be like 9 to 5, Monday through Fridays.
So
something like
so
that.
So it's almost a week before.
Yeah, so it would be like no later than, say, Wednesday evening prior to it. People said that they didn't want to get them on Friday evenings.
Well, I guess Eric's making a semantic point, but an important one. If you only count the hours between 9 and 5 as business hours, that's 8 per day. So this would be 6 days, excluding weekends. It is kind of it might be better to say 2 business days.
Yeah.
Just because that's kind of commonly accepted vernacular. I get exactly what you were shooting for. I'm just thinking that.
Yeah.
No, that's an excellent point.
Dan?
Yes, Roger.
The way I read this, 48 hours prior says, I think you're right. It should be 2 days. But what I'm concerned about is, it seems to me we meet at night, so Monday should count. The way I read this, I think the intent is that we need to have it by Thursday night.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'm trying to think of an artful way to phrase that doesn't lead to unintended consequences.
I think 2 business rather than 48 business hours would accomplish that.
And maybe just throw a clause in there that says something to the effect of, you know, understanding that the day of an evening meeting counts.
Yeah.
And again, I don't, without thinking about it, I don't have a pithy way to phrase that, but I'm sure there is one.
Does that, if, however we word it, does it make sense that that Thursday night is the cutoff?
I think so. Anybody have a strong opinion to the contrary?
Unless the meeting's not on Mondays, then you'd have to go back and change this.
Oh, there you go.
How about
Well,
2 revolutions of the moon?
Mr. Chair.
Please save us from these smart aleck remarks, Zach.
Apologies.
The text could simply be amended to read 2 business days prior to the next regularly scheduled meeting.
There you go.
That sounds.
Yeah. As
I
long
hate to
as
say I have experience with this type of language, but I have experience with this type of language.
all right, but I'm amenable to that. Does anybody see an issue with it? Hearing none. Other comments or thoughts or suggestions?
Okay, so I've got the actual Word doc that I had.
Mhm.
So I'm going to change that to where it says no later than 48 business hours, no later than 2 business days prior to the next regularly scheduled meeting.
Right.
Correct.
That's good.
Okay.
That should cover the bases well enough to tell folks that
Yeah.
we don't necessarily want to get stuff late Friday night or sometime Monday, whatever.
Yeah, no, that's abundantly clear.
Continue the suggestion. I would suggest the mechanics of trying to have the majority of a committee vote prior to within that 48-hour period. That could be difficult. Suggest striking number 2 and just leaving it in the hands of the chair to make that decision.
I think they're shooting for, I don't want to put words in Joe's mouth, but I think they're shooting for 2 different things. The first one is talking about agenda items. The second one is talking about document submissions, like the monthly financials from the town and the school district.
However,
Yeah, so the intent was Dan could potentially get something that day of the meeting and put that on the agenda. But then the committee has the option of then saying, no, I really don't want to discuss this today because I really haven't had time to look at it. That's what the intent was.
that makes more sense to me then.
Yeah, that does.
I think we all appreciate getting information whenever it becomes available, but we may just not feel that we're ready to have a well-formed discussion on it. So I think this allows for that decision to be made.
So should we also change that to 2 business days?
Yeah, I think we should, my
was
opinion
the
is we should keep
intention.
the 2 of them aligned on the wording. Anybody else have comments, suggestions? All right, so having amended this, I'm going to suggest that we let Joe reissue this before our next meeting, and then we can have a formal vote on it a month from now. Is that acceptable to everyone?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right.
It's acceptable to me.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Joe.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. We appreciate you did
Well, Zach
on
did
it.
most of it.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Both of you, we appreciate the thought that went into it and the effort. Which brings us to the final, but far from the least item that we have on our agenda tonight. We have an applicant for the open position on the budget committee. I imagine most of you know or at least know of Matt Evangelista. He's served on the school board in the past, some other capacities in town. So Matt, assuming we haven't put you to sleep already by this point, if you'd like to come off mute and if there's anything you'd like to say addressing the committee, now would be the time to do so.
I'll forever hold my peace.
All right. Well, that's you are well within your rights.
No, I appreciate the opportunity. It was one of the things that after I was on the school board and I got distracted with work and all and chasing a career. And one of the things I've always been interested in getting is re-engaged in the community. Budgets are something, a yeoman's effort and a team effort. And I realized the value that having a complete staff means to working with everybody on the budget. So after speaking with my wife and family, they were supportive of it. And with all the free time that I've had working at home and traveling, I've had an opportunity to sit down and think about it. And I would like to jump back into it. And the budget committee, with the opening that it had, I think it's important to have an understanding of where the town is, where it's going. And the budget is usually the first place that I like to look at and to get engaged and to learn more about where the town has an opportunity to expand it. That's all I have to say. I mean, unless you have questions for me. I mean, currently my background right now is obviously, as a lot of you know, is that I'm a director of North American data centers for a managed hosting company in the internet. Currently, I oversee about between 20 to $30 million worth of budget between data center spaces and power and things like that. I think one of the things I've really been engaged with in the past 2 months is managing our electric bill, which is substantially high. And we're trying to. So I realized that simply by saving 2 cents on our monthly budget with the electric bill per month is roughly $45,000 a month by just saving 2 cents. So I realized the value of a dollar. And it's amazing to see the difference and the impact that would make. So I don't mind delving into the details and the granular levels. And I like to learn.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Any questions from committee members or any discussion?
Just a reminder, I guess, that he can't vote on anything until he gets sworn in, right?
That's correct. Just we'll vote on this obviously in a minute, and if you're confirmed by the committee, then you'll need to go visit with Terry Littlefield and get sworn in, out of cycle. I believe, Eric, confirm or deny, can that even be done remotely or?
No, I had to go there. I did it outside
Okay.
in the parking lot.
You can stand 10 feet away and.
Yes, I swear.
I make a motion to approve Matt Evangelista, a budget committee member.
Thank you, Mike. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Eric. Any more discussion or questions? Hearing none. We'll do a roll call vote. Rob Ortons.
I vote aye.
Joe Lamatina.
Aye.
Roger Cady.
Aye.
Mike LeBranch.
Aye.
John Baldy.
Aye.
Eric Wagode.
Aye.
Mike Kennison.
Aye.
Zach Demont.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. We are unanimous with one extension. Matt, welcome to the Budget Committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We look forward to working with you. So we have reached the end of our.
We still have the minutes to deal with.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I keep forgetting about that. So the minutes, I guess first, do I have a motion to accept the minutes of the August 3rd, 2020 Budget Committee meeting?
So moved.
Thank you, Rob. Second.
I second.
Thank you, Joe. Open it up for comment. There's obviously we have a gap where the video or audio, I haven't watched it myself, so I'm not certain what cut out, but if you're looking at the line numbered version that I sent around, it's at line 143. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to that section or any other comments or edits for the minutes from the last meeting?
I just have a general question. So what happens in a case like this where you're, we're doing this all remote and suddenly, you're missing a piece of it. The infamous 18 minutes of Nixon here.
I think Zach has an answer for your question, better than the one I'd have anyway.
Okay.
Yes. Richard Nixon allegories aside, the minutes don't have to be a word for word account. This committee could insert a general summary or just a general explanation, either of what was discussed or simply saying that the audio cut out and the recording was lost and it would be acceptable. We don't have to have the word for word reconstruction of everything.
So the way the minutes state right now is that, it was kind of that's okay to have that in there like that.
I gotta pull that document back up. I can't seem to find it on my.
I'll just, Zach, for everyone's benefit. So there's the paragraph prior reads, Chairman Smith said next on the agenda is the school district and welcome new school business administrator Jana Mellon. She was happy to be here and Dave Jack will assist her with the presentation. Next thing on line 143, due to technical difficulties, part of this meeting was lost. That sentence is italicized and bold-faced. And then following that, we go into a discussion. Dave Jack said that the revenue picture is very good for fiscal year 2020 and expenditures were equally as good. I mean, based on my recollection, I don't think we are missing a great deal because my recollection is that Dave Jack kind of tore into the end of fiscal year 2020 picture right after we introduced and welcomed Jana. Does anybody remember anything of substance that got missed there?
What's important for the minutes and important for the record is any votes that we actually took, and I don't believe we did during that time frame. It is unfortunate that the video's not there, so folks can't see the discussion. But in terms of I don't recall any votes during that time.
I don't remember anything of serious or significant substance that would need to be. So I'm in agreement with you, Mike.
Yeah, I think it was mainly just introductory commentary. So again, if anybody has something of substance that they think needs to be put into the minutes during that gap, please speak now.
I don't remember what I had for breakfast.
Well, see, that'll be in the next minutes that come out, Joe. So you're on the record now. All right, other edits or anything anyone feels is missing. I read through it. I did not see anything at odds with my recollection.
And this is Joe, I didn't see anything I disagreed with or, any mistakes or anything.
My eyes are usually drawn to the numbers and they all tied out with what I remembered. Actually, well, I'll throw one incredibly ticky-tack thing out. On row or line 233 at the bottom of page 5, that should say $20 per student, not hashtag 20,000.
Oh, yeah.
But that's all I see.
I have line 239, but
Oh, okay, maybe the, all right. At any rate, for Patricia, when you're listening to this later, it's at the end of the paragraph that, um, second paragraph under the heading potential for presentation to committee on sources and uses of New Hampshire state taxes. All right, hearing no other comments, we'll do a roll call vote. We're voting on approving the minutes from the August 3rd meeting as edited. Rob Ortons,
Aye.
Roger Cady,
Aye.
Joe Lamatina,
Aye.
Mike LeBranch,
Aye.
John Baldy,
Aye.
Eric Wagode.
I will abstain.
Oh, okay. Mike Kennison,
Aye.
Zach Dumont.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. So we are unanimous with 2 abstentions, Eric and Jeff. All right, that is the end of our published agenda for the evening. Does anybody have anything they'd like to raise under other business?
Dan, I just wanted to ask whether Cahill will be joining us for the next meeting.
I don't know the answer to that, but, or Joe, do you?
Yeah, so I don't know about Mike. I assume Mike will be there, but I did want to talk about this. For our next meeting, there was a committee that the state formed to study school funding. And they're just wrapping it up. But I think at our next meeting that we will have the chair from that committee, Dave Lanou, and possibly Mike.
I would, sounds fantastic to me. The smarter we get, the better.
My intent was just, so everybody kind of like hears. Patty's thing was a little bit of a bummer, but yeah. I just want to bring, have people understand. New Hampshire does collect taxes, where the money's going, and what might be on the line here that can have a significant impact, I think, on the town here.
Well, and I think particularly in the current climate, it's just important to, there's a lot of big decisions that are going to have to be made on budgeting for the upcoming year because the state revenue picture is very uncertain at this point. And, the smarter we can get about what that picture looks like and anything that might be coming down the pipe from Concord, will benefit everybody in terms of trying to put a budget in place that we can live with and live within. So I again, as I said earlier, I really appreciate Patty's time, and we're not trying to exclude anybody. If there are other of our elected representatives who'd like to, participate and share their knowledge with us, I think it's important in an election. Well, every year is an election year in New Hampshire, but in a broader election year that we, make it well understood. This isn't a partisan thing. We're trying to get educated and we welcome anybody who'd like to contribute to that.
I mean, we did discuss this at our last meeting. I brought up that she was running for executive council and that, I suggested that maybe we wait till after the primary, but we agreed that it's not a campaign event and the state reps are, there to give us information. So.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I would assume most people would support me. If somebody like switched to a mode where they were actively campaigning, I would probably politely ask them to stop because that isn't the point of this. But that's the reality is these are all folks who make decisions in Concord that ultimately affect our budget. So the better we understand that, the better we can do our jobs. Anything else anyone would like to bring up under other business? Going once, going twice. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a
move.
motion to adjourn.
All right. I heard a motion from Roger. Zach, would you like to second that?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. We'll do a roll call vote. Rob,
Aye.
Roger,
Aye.
Aye.
Mike LeBranch,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Mike Kennison,
Aye.
Zach.
Aye.
We are unanimous and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good night.
Right.